Howdy, folks, and welcome to another day in the Milky Way. And tonight we got a great show for you. We're going to do Buffalo Bill Wild West Stories and Adventures number 8. If the dog would quit yelling in the background. But anyway, it's going to be a good show. Remember, we're going to pick up right where we left off last time with Buffalo Bill. And he found his friend, Lieutenant Danforth, dead. He made a promise. He was saved by the girl. Oh, my goodness. What more could actually happen to Buffalo Bill being saved by White Antelope? Now, he made a promise to her that he would, where is he? He would get back to her. And of course, as you know, when you make a promise in the old days, you really make a promise. So, with that, we're going to get back into it. Of course, I know you're all been listening patiently and due diligently. So, kick back, enjoy tonight's episode. Get yourself something nice and hot to drink if it's cold out, or whatever you like. Tea, coffee, maybe a hot chocolate. Yes, kick back, relax, let the old times come back, just like they did in the days of yesteryear, where they listened to the radio of the old time stories. So let's go back in time. Imagine yourself going back in time, relax, and listen to the story at hand. Okay. We pick up where we left off last time at somewhere back here. Sorry, I didn't get that. We were on 22. Amazingly, 2022 here. Yeah, Buffalo Bill, he's been having quite the adventure. Escaped so many scrapes, it's amazing. But as always, the Border King is coming back for more. So let's pick that up. The Border King's pledge. Buffalo Bill was hastened to find Texas Jack and report what happened in the valley, and then sent him onto the fort while he returned to bury the dead lieutenant and his men when he saw the danger of Captain Keyes. That's right. He had saved Captain Keyes from the wild man, covered giant man, the madman of the West, covered in furs. And shot him off the side of a hill, saving Captain Keyes. From the latter, he learned that Lieutenant Danforth had a dream of seeing him, Cody, a prisoner of the Sioux, and he had urged Major Baldwin to allow him to take some score of men to discover if it was true. Realizing the Danforth's reckless nature, Major Baldwin, the day after the party left, had ordered Captain Edwards L. Keyes with 2 troops of cavalry and a dozen scouts to go on the trail of the young officer, and also to look for the Border King and Texas Jack up. On the way, only that afternoon, they had met Texas Jack, and he reported that he was to meet Buffalo Bill within the next day, but he had not seen Lieutenant Danforth and his men, yet had come upon the trail and was sorry to see it leading so near to Chief Oakhart's village. And Captain's meeting with Buffalo Bill had revealed the sad story of the fate of Captain Danforth and his men. With him, Captain Keyes had over 100 troopers and company of mounted infantry and 2 mountain guns, numbering with the artillerymen and scouts nearly 200, a strong flying column that could move rapidly and stand off a big force of Indians. They were then encamped in the valley and not a dozen miles from the village of Oakhart. It was a pleasant surprise to see Buffalo Bill come up into the camp with Captain Keyes. Orders had been given for the men to turn in early, for a start would be made before dawn, but for once, unheeding discipline, the soldiers sat around the campfires talking in low, earnest tones of fearful tidings brought by the scout, and many a suppressed oath of vengeance was made by those who knew the gallant dead. The officers had breathlessly listened to the scout's story of what had suddenly burst upon his amazement and horrified vision. The scene there, with the renegade Bennett and his warriors, the saving of the life of White Antelope, who wounded him with an arrow. To do so, for had he killed the white medicine chief, his death would have followed, and at last the pledge to deliver himself up were all made known, while the surgeon skillfully dressed his wound. "But you certainly do not intend to keep your pledge, Cody," said Captain Keyes, noticing the earnest manner of the scout. "I certainly do intend to keep it," was the low reply. At this, every officer was upon his feet, gazing at the scout in amazement and real indignation that he should think of keeping a promise so made. "By the gods of war, what, they'll burn you at the stake, Bill," cried the young officer. Why, you, all men, Cody. The Sioux are anxious to get into their power," cried another. "I know that they're anxious to make more intimate acquaintance, gentlemen, and I intend to give them the chance," was the calm reply of Buffalo Bill. "Never, Cody. But I will hear no buts, Cody. For if you persist in your foolish intention of keeping your word made to an Indian girl and a renegade, I will put you under arrest," said Keyes. "I'm afraid I'll go gray in the guardhouse then. I forbid you to return to the redskin camp because you were forced to make a promise to save your life." "I must remain firm to my determination, sir, for if I take big chances in going to Oakhart's camp, I also hope to accomplish a purpose I have in mind." The officers all saw that the scout was determined in his purpose and had some object in view which he cared not to make known to them. But Captain Keyes said, "Cody, I owe you my life, and in the past services I could never repay, and even by the harshest means. I keep you from making a fool of yourself and losing your life. I intend to do so. Every man on the border who is your foe knows what Buffalo Bill is, and I intend that you shall know what a friend is." Buffalo Bill laughed slightly, and before he could reply, a sergeant entered and saluted. "Well, Sergeant?" "He's not there, sir." "Who's not there, Sergeant?" "The madman, sir." "Ha! I remember you were in the place of Murphy to bring the body of the madman into camp." "Yes, sir," answered the sergeant. "And you say the body was not there?" "Yes, sir." "Did you go up to the top of the ridge?" "Yes, sir, and along the top of it and each side where the trail led." "And searched thoroughly?" "I did, sir, and so did 8 men I had with me." "This is strange, Cody, for certainly killed that madman." And Keyes turned to the scout, who responded, "I shot and killed him and aimed at his head, but he may be as much of a grizzly as he looks, and hard to slay. I will go up on the ridge with the sergeant and see if he found the right spot." "Do so, Cody, if you are not too tired, for I confess that I prefer that the mad giant should rather be dead than alive." Buffalo Bill left the tent and accompanied by a sergeant and his squad went towards the hills, leaving the officers still discussing the sad tidings that they heard Danforth and his men. In half an hour the sergeant returned and alone. "Where's the scout, Sergeant?" asked the captain. He left us on the ridge, sir. Left you? Yes, sir. And where did he go? And Captain Keyes seemed anxious to await the reply. We did not find the madman, sir, or any trace of him, and Mr. Cody sent one of my men to camp after his horse and rode away, telling me to say to you, sir, that he would try to see if he couldn't get this grip upon the mad hunter or Oakheart before he saw you again. By the gods of war, he's gone, cried the captain in a tone of real distress, for he feared that Buffalo Bill, to keep his word with the White Antelope, had rashly gone to his death. Chapter 23. Tracking the Madman. That Buffalo Bill was intensely surprised upon researching the spot where he knew the mad hunter had fallen. To find him gone, where is no doubt, the aim had been a quick one, a distance great, and he had barely time to see a huge being clothed in hair rushing a knife in hand upon those in uniform, proved him to be an officer. He saw how bravely the officers faced his foe, sword in hand, and he raised his rifle and sent his bullet upon his unerring way. Well, there you go. Arriving at the spot afterwards, he had not for a moment doubted that his aim was fatal, for a glance had shown him the huge head marked with a red stain, and the tidings of which he was the bearer had sunk the madman into importance and honor. And only upon arriving at the site had Captain Keyes sent back the body. Buffalo Bill knew that there was no mistaking the spot where the mad hunter had fallen, and yet he was not there. He had disappeared. He had friends near who had seen the encounter and then dragged him off. After a moment, he felt that this could not be, for he remembered that in all the stories he had heard of the madman, it was never said that he had a companion, and that he made war upon all human beings alike. At any rate, being out of an encampment, Buffalo Bill determined to remain away, and as the sergeant reported, sent for his horse. Riding away in the darkness, he did not go very far, but went into a lonely camp for the night, and in full view of the campfire of the soldiers. Knowing that the soldiers would leave before dawn and push on to the valley with all rapidness, he did not fear being discovered in the darkness, and after looking to the comfort of his horse, rolled himself in his blanket and lay down to seek slumber. He was awakened by the moving of the command over the ridge, but remained quiet, as it was yet dark. He sunk to sleep again and never awoke until the rising sun set its rays onto his face. The scout was a man who always traveled well provided with provisions, and his breakfast was by no means a light repast, while he ate it with a will that showed that he had the strength to demand a generous meal. Saddling his horse, he mounted and rode along the ridge to where the military command had crossed. The last soldier had been for some time out of sight, having disappeared into the recesses of the distant range of hills, and Buffalo Bill then sent to work to solve the mysterious disappearance of the mad hunter. Though plainsman as he was, it did not take him long to discover that his shot had not been fatal, and that the madman had left of his own accord. How seriously he was wounded, he could not tell, so he followed the large footed trail along the ridge and then down into the valley across it, and then up the range of hills upon the other side. As something about the trail seemed to strike him, Buffalo Bill suddenly hastened on, and reaching a high elevation, took a survey of the scene below. The trail which he commanded was following led down into the valley beyond alongside of a steep bluff at its base, and this they were just passing when the scout arrived at this point of observation. The course had led and taken in following the madman's trail had brought him out at the point ahead of the marching soldiers, but it was not upon them as they went by at the base of the range of hills that his eyes rested after the first glance, but upon the tall form of the mad hunter. In an instant, Buffalo Bill divined his object. Thwarted in his revenge the night before, he had seen the trail the troopers had taken and acquainted with the locality, knew that they must pass under the bluff, and hence he had gone to the head of them. So intent was he at his work when Buffalo Bill stepped upon the hill above him that he did not see him. He was gathering huge rocks and piling them upon the edge of the cliff, beneath which the head of the column must soon pass. His intention was evident, for several hundred feet below him and immediately beneath the trailhead, and the maddened being meant murder is the vilest shape. At first, the scout meant to hail the column and warn them of their danger, but with a second glance at the madman, he changed his purpose, threw the rein of his horse over a limb, and leaving his rifle hanging to his saddle, stepped noiselessly over the top of the hill and descended slowly toward the huge being at his devilish work. With a shot from his revolver, Buffalo Bill knew that he could drop him dead, but he was no man to take such an advantage, even against one who was said to possess the strength of Samson. With a step rendered light and noiseless by following many a deadly trail, the scout descended the hillside, keeping in the shelter of the scattered trees until he stood within 20 feet of the mad hunter. Buffalo Bill saw that his eyes were as fierce as a wolf's, and that his hands opened and shut with nervous clutches, and his body was bent forward with eager hope of cruel revenge. Nearer and nearer drew the column of soldiers. Though a gap in the bluff, Buffalo Bill saw the Captain Keyes and those about him were to be the object of the mad hunter's attention, and he stood readily to act. As they rode from sight upon the trail winding directly under the precipitous hillside, the madman carefully selected a huge stone, and raising it above his head was picking out his victim, when Buffalo Bill bounded from his place and concealment, and with a revolver in one hand and the other lightly touching the giant upon his shoulder, with the quiet remark, "Say, Shanghai partner, drop that tombstone and tackle me if you are planning on to kill somebody." The madman's gigantic frame, rendered large by his hairy attire and his high wolf skin cap, his savage beard face, made him a foe that few men would have dared to face. Buffalo Bill could have dropped him in his tracks as he stood, but there was too much manlessness in his nature to take such an advantage, although he knew he had little more than a wild beast in furiosity to deal with. The madness of the man he pitied, and he determined to see if he could not cow him into submission. He was wholly upon his guard, therefore, when he laid his hand upon the arm of the madman shrunk back as though an alder had stung him, at the same time uttering a wild cry of terror. Still, he did not lower his upraised hands, nor drop the huge stone they held. Trembling violently, he gazed upon the scout, who kept him covered with his revolver, and as the fierce expression in his eyes changed to look at Buffalo Bill, who watched him like a hawk, could not fathom, he began to back slowly from before the man who had so boldly confronted him. His wild yell had been heard by the marching soldiers below. A shout had been the answer, and the column had halted and stood gazed as though spellbound with horror upon the scene through a break in the bluff. This much Buffalo Bill saw, as well as the madman was backing off so that he could get space to hurtle the stone at him. "Drop that stone, Bluebeard." The order was given in a stern, threatening tone in spite of the light words, and Buffalo Bill held the eye of the madman as he spoke. Instantly, the heavy stone fell with a crash to earth, and the madman's hands dropped to his sides, passing the butts of his pistols with no effort to grasp them. Why, this was a picnic when I expected to tackle a cyclone, said the scout in his half offhand way, and still covering the madman, he was about to advance upon him when a loud cry came from the plain below. "Hold, Cody! For God's sakes, hold!" But he uttered no word in reply, and again nerved himself to advance upon the madman. As for a strange being, he seemed not to have heard the cry, but stood trembling and gazing upon the scout, while his jaws moved as though he was gritting his teeth with rage. Seeing Buffalo Bill again advance as though to try his strength with the madman, for he had lowered his weapon, Captain Keyes shouted, "Hold, Cody, for here comes Texas Jack, who can drop him where he stands." Buffalo Bill heeded not the command and at once stepped boldly toward the madman. As he did, so did the strange being, gave a cry of seemingly fright, shrunk backward, waved his hands as though to ward off the scout, and then, with a bound of a deer, he started away in a wild run. Buffalo Bill was amazed and half raised his revolver as though to check his flight, but thinking better of it, on the instant returned the weapon to his belt with the remark, "Poor mad wretch, let him go." Behold, the flight of the madman, when they had expected him to see him spring upon the scouts and the soldiers, broke forth in one long, wild cheer, and up the hillside floated the ring of words, "Bravo for you, Buffalo Bill." The scout raised his hat in response and turned away, and though the command waited for some time as though expecting to have him join them, he did not come. Then Texas Jack went up the top of the bluff and soon after returned to report that he had seen nothing of the madman or of Buffalo Bill either. "But where have they gone?" persisted the captain. "The trail showed that the madman had dug out for all he was worth, sir, and Buffalo Bill was hot on his tracks." Then Buffalo Bill had again gone in chase of the madman, Jack. "Holy smokes, look there!" The explanation of the guide, followed by his words in a loud voice, caused every eye to glance upwards, for his gaze was fixed upon the top of the bluff, which they had passed beneath only a few moments before. There was no reason for anyone to ask what had caused that cry, for there, in plain view of all, were two visible human forms engaged in a death struggle upon the very verge of the precipice. When Buffalo Bill allowed the madman to go, from his pity, his next thought was that he would yet kill, if he could, Captain Keyes or others, and he followed him to again discover him on another bluff, about to hurtle a large stone down upon the soldiers. He tried to make him yield to him, but in an instant the madman was upon him and striving to hurl him from the cliff. But with his words of alarm, Texas Jack had thrown his rifle to his shoulder, watched his chance, and pulled the trigger. Back from the bluff staggered the madman, and away up the steep path bounded Texas Jack. There lay the madman, dead. Texas Jack's shot had done its work, but Buffalo Bill had gone. He feared that Captain Keyes would prevent him from keeping his pledge to White Antelope. The madman was buried where he had fallen, and Captain Keyes then marched on to the valley to place the bodies of Lieutenant Danforth and his men in their graves. He quickly fortified his camp, buried his dead, and then moved off to a strong position half a day's march away, while Texas Jack and his men in buckskin scouted about in search of their chief, the Border King. Well, there you go. Chapter 25. We're going to leave it right there for tonight. I hope you all enjoyed that. Ooh, that was a good one. The Madman. But luckily, Texas Jack come up and saved Buffalo Bill with a good shot, killing the Madman, saving all the troops below. Yep, that would be a terrible way to die as the rocks come flowing down the hill and you sit there thinking, it's a big rock and it's coming my way and I can't get out of the way. So with that, I hope you enjoyed. We should have one more show on this, and I think I can finish it up. It's getting right about to the end if I really do a good job. Anyway, thank you all. I don't want to keep your time. Go and enjoy the day. Enjoy the season, for it is a season to be happy and merry and, go out and do something nice for somebody. Hope you're enjoying these shows. Hope you're enjoying the story. Remember, go out and be the frequency you want to receive, everyone. It is what we do around here. Love y'all, everyone. Peace, everybody.